My name is Jacob Ryder, and this is my client question video. I tend to work mostly with individuals who are performing resistance training programs multiple times per week. Many of my clients in the past and currently are powerlifters, weightlifters, and those who are currently training for strength and size. So one of the common questions or subset of questions that I receive from clients has to do with supplements. It should be noted that supplements are just that. They are meant to supplement an already existing diet plan. It is not meant to replace or take away from any other nutrients that you might gain from a healthy diet, a healthy balanced diet. And any supplements that you might consider taking, you should probably consult with your primary care physician before doing so. Now, that being said, one of the most common questions I get, especially in the strength and hypertrophy circles, is about creatine. Now, the questions vary, but usually come in the form of what is creatine? What does it do? Should I be taking creatine? And if so, how much? And are there any other potential side effects or body composition changes that might occur with taking creatine? Now, what is creatine? Creatine is actually naturally producing in the body in the form of phosphocreatine. Now, our body uses ATP, remember back from biology, ATP is the energy currency of the body. Now, phosphocreatine is used by the body to resynthesize ATP stores during intense exercise. Now, creatine is also found in meat, red meat particularly, and some fish as well. Now, supplemental creatine, typically in the form of creatine monohydrate, which is the most common, is used to help replenish or restore those creatine stores in the muscle tissue. Now, I pulled up a meta-analysis from Dempsey and his colleagues from 2002 to look at a few different things. Now, first of all, we're going to look at dosing of creatine. Now, the data collected from Dempsey and his colleagues showed that on average, most of the studies on creatine and sport performance, the dose used was roughly around 5 grams per day. And some of the studies actually had a 1-week loading period, which is a period in which the dose for that week is much higher. Usually around 20 grams is what I'm seeing from the literature. So 20 grams of creatine per day for the first week, or first 5 days, maybe in some cases. And then afterwards, tapering down the amount of creatine back to 5 grams a day. There were a few studies in there that were as low as 3 or 4 grams per day, but by and large, most of them were about 5 grams a day. So, looking further into some of the uses for creatine, Dempsey et al. And some of the other studies that we are looking at noted that creatine really was mostly helpful for high-intensity resistance training. Lower intensity or endurance training, such as running, swimming, or long-distance cycling, tended not to have that much benefit, if any at all. So if you are going to consider taking creatine, it will probably be most helpful for those who are doing submax or max intensity resistance training with higher loads. Another study by Creeder et al. From 1998 looked at creatine supplementation and the effects on strength in the bench press, squat, and power clean movements, body composition using DEXA scans, as well as sprint performance in collegiate football players. Now, the study lasted 28 days, and the football players were divvied up into 2 groups, a creatine group with 11 participants and a control group of 14 participants. Now, those in the creatine group were given about just over 15 grams of creatine per day. Test subjects were tested both before and at the end of the full study. Now, the authors had observed that by the end of the study, the changes in body mass were more significant in those who had taken creatine. In fact, the increase in fat-free mass as tested by DEXA, was double that of the increase in fat mass or fat-free mass by the control group. Now, also in the bench press, squat, and power clean movements, the creatine group was able to do between 30 and 50% more volume of work in those training sessions than the control group. Another study that was pretty interesting by Hakim and his colleagues from 2012 looked at different forms of creatine. We know there are many different forms of creatine on the market. The most common is creatine monohydrate, though there is creatine ethyl ester and crealkaline, or a buffered form of creatine as well. Now, Hakim and his colleagues had looked specifically at a buffered form of creatine in the form of crealkaline versus traditional creatine monohydrate. What they found was that between the two groups, they had 36 participants in total, split evenly, and one group was given creatine monohydrate, the other was given the buffered form of creatine in equivalent doses, and the study lasted 28 days. They tested between the beginning, 7 days in, and 28 days into the study. They tested 1 rep max in bench press and leg press. And they also tested blood samples and muscle biopsies of the vastus lateralis and performed Wingate cycling test between the two groups. And what they found was that there were significantly no differences whatsoever between either group in increases in strength or the Wingate test. And the only real significant difference between the two groups was that the muscle creatine stores were greater in the creatine monohydrate group than they were in the crealkaline group. Now, Mayak and his colleagues from 2000 looked at the current literature, saw there weren't very much regarding differences between men and women, biological men and women, and creatine supplementation. So they decided to set out and perform a study in which both men and women were included. They were taking 20 grams of creatine monohydrate per day for 5 days, and then a maintenance dose of 5 grams after that for the duration of the study, which I believe is 4 weeks. Now, in this study, they found that the differences between men and women in creatine supplementation actually wasn't that different. While both men and women did increase in fat-free mass and in total mass, as seen by DEXA, the total weight gained was much greater in men than it was in women, and it may actually be quite relative. The average weight gain for men was about 5 pounds, 4 to 6 pounds, whereas the average weight gain for women was about 2 to 3 pounds. So quite a difference there, though that may play into the fact that the women on average were smaller to begin with than the men, and so the changes may be equal in relative terms, even though the absolute changes were quite different. So to wrap things up, creatine is naturally occurring in the body, is naturally produced by the body. We also find it in many of our red meat and fish, and we can find it on supplement store shelves in the form of creatine monohydrate and several other forms. And it helps to resynthesize our ATP stores to help us do intense exercise bouts lasting about 10 seconds or less. And creatine has been shown by several of the studies mentioned here that it can improve strength output and total volume of work performed in a single exercise session, potentially leading to greater gains in strength and hypertrophy or muscle size. Also, we know that body composition changes do occur both in men and women, though may be more significant in men in terms of total change in fat-free mass and water retention, possibly. So if you are someone who is performing resistance training frequently on a regular basis, and you are looking to increase strength, power output, or hypertrophy, creatine may be a very viable and reliable option for you. But again, please consult with your doctor before you decide to take any supplement, and make sure that you are healthy enough to do so. Thank you.